On October 1st, 2021, a 19-year-old indie developer in a remote pocket of Washington state posted a trailer. It was a trailer for a horror video game called Choo Choo Charles, a game that didn't exist yet, aside from a Steam page. The trailer went viral and wish lists started pouring in, and this young indie dev, Gavin Eisenbeisz, suddenly had an audience and a game to make. But this viral trailer wasn't happenstance, neither was the game's genre, the look of its antagonist, or the engine it was using. It was all part of a plan, a strategy born from a developer with a ticking clock hanging over his head. You see, Gavin wanted to be a game developer, but his parents, like any good parents, wanted him to have an education to fall back on. He'd released a few indie games in the past, but Gavin needed a bona fide hit to convince his parents that he could bypass college and jump straight into professional game dev. With no formal training or industry connections, Gavin had a mountain to climb. To create a hit game, he was going to have to do something special, something that grabbed the attention of players around the world. In getting thousands of people to wishlist Choo Choo Charles, Gavin had made that crucial first step. Now all he had to do was make a hit game. I interviewed Gavin on the Noclip podcast a few weeks after that trailer first hit, and I was struck by how level-headed he was despite the tough road that he had ahead of him. Hype can be a death sentence if not handled the right way, and I was really interested in how he'd cope in not just making the game, but stopping his audience's expectations from running wild. This was, after all, a game made by a single developer. What happened with Choo Choo Charles over the next 15 months was fascinating, and so once the dust had settled, I travelled to the northern coast of Washington's Olympic Peninsula to catch up with Gavin about how it all went down. The things that went right, the stuff that went wrong, the 4 out of 10 from IGN, and what all those fans eventually thought when they got their own hands on Choo Choo Charles.
I liked video games when I was younger, obviously, like pretty much everyone. And, eventually when I learned that you could just make games on your own for free on your home computer, I don't know, it's just an enthralling concept to me. I say I was a kindergarten dropout. Right. I went to public school until kindergarten, then I was homeschooled until I graduated in high school. Originally, I started on mobile. I really wanted to make mobile games. So I did a game called Sumo Skies, about a skydiving sumo wrestler. Strange concept, but it sounded really cool as a, 14-year-old. I did a game called Behind These Eyes, I think when I was 16, 17. That was like my first real PC game, my first Steam game. Horrible game, but it made it to Steam. I made a couple $100 off of it, so I was happy with it. A couple of smaller game jam games as well. Cloud Climber and My Friend is a Raven over the course of a couple years. And then I did My Beautiful Paper Smile, which was kind of my first major, sort of serious commercial game. It did okay, but it wasn't quite where I wanted things to be. And then after that, I started doing Choo Choo Charles.
So how old are you when you were releasing My Beautiful Paper Smile?
I started that one, I want to say when I was 16, and finished it, or published it actually, a month after I announced Choo Choo Charles. Right. So just a year ago is when I finished that at 20.
Well, when did you start learning a language, and what was it?
Never. I just used Blueprint, and it's that's actually why I started using Unreal Engine, is because I was like, I want to do this visual scripting thing. That sounds fun, and I just haven't had to change at all. It's worked well enough. My parents, they just had their home office PC just for whatever emails, web surfing, all that. And that was kind of where I first started, doing development stuff.
Nice. Were they cool with you using it to make games?
Yeah, I think so. They limited my my development time though. They had screen time limits. That made me very angry, but I forgive you, Dad.
When he started making video games, that was his way to do this educational thing of learning how to make video games. But he would make video games and spend hours playing and testing his video games. So he was kind of getting around that screen time limit.
What was Gavin like as a kid growing up?
He was really smart, very creative. He and his brother used to do a lot of imaginary things. I kind of remember them making videos about gold mining and moonshining and all those kind of things. He took it very seriously from the very beginning, and I'd say probably when he started working on My Beautiful Paper Smile, that's when I knew that he was going to be doing this professionally. I could see that he was picking it up really fast, and he was doing high quality work, and he was getting better and better. It was easy to see that he knew what he was doing. The worry was knowing that video game development is a creative endeavor, it's an artistic work, and not everybody appreciates everybody's art. And he can do a good job, he could make a great game, but it doesn't mean that it'll be well received. And there's a lot of starving artists out there. That was the worry. Is he going to spend all this time and maybe not have a commercial success?
Right.
Will he need to have an education to back him up? When he was still working on My Beautiful Paper Smile, that was when we had the conversation about college.
So originally, I would have been going to college, I think about a year before I started working on Choo Choo Charles. And so I kind of managed to get my way out of it because I signed a deal with a publisher on My Beautiful Paper Smile. So now I was legally obligated to work on that game and finish that game. By the time that game finished, I'd started making money off of some programming courses. And so college was starting to make a little bit less sense because I was already making money kind of on my own. And then Choo Choo Charles went viral a few months after that. And it's like, okay, yeah, so this is something that I can, work on and something that I could bet on.
Yeah.
By the time Gavin started on this project, he had accumulated a healthy amount of solo dev experience for somebody his age. More importantly, he seemed to have a very good understanding of where his weaknesses lied, the areas he lacked experience. But even more importantly than that, perhaps, he knew that without an audience, none of that was going to matter. He could spend a year or two working on a game and have absolutely nobody play it if they never found out about it. So what he decided to do instead was to pitch a game to the internet and gauge interest from there. So, how did he come up with the pitch?
So the goal was to try and make it go viral. I had never gone viral with anything before, so I didn't know if it would actually work. I just did everything that I could. So that was kind of the goal. And so I had kind of a bit of a unique perspective having done YouTube for a bit. Not super successfully, but I kind of understood the content creator mindset, I guess. It was a big point for me to try to do anything I could to make the game go just be more inherently viral. I mean, obviously a big one is Spider Train. Spider Train is a pretty big part of that. But there's so much stuff like just the lighting, art style, the visual elements to the gameplay, trains, color schemes. It's just a lot of... The name, yeah, lots of stuff. Horror games, all the time, they'll take something that's cute or innocent and they'll make it scary. Oh, evil dolls, evil animatronics, whatever it might be. And so I was kind of realizing that there weren't many horror games or horror movies that kind of played off of kids' TV shows. And those are huge. I mean, everybody has watched a kids' TV show as a kid. And so my favorite one growing up was Thomas the Tank Engine. So I was like, well, a train-based game would actually be kind of cool. So that's where the initial concept of a train-based game came from. So I was like, well, okay, you could have a train monster. And then I had seen Tom Coben's animations pop up over the years. He's done these Cursed Thomas.exe type things where it's like a Spider Thomas. And so I was like, I could just kind of sort of take the spider legs and just sort of put them on this new character. And so that's where that came from. So I spent about a month working on the game, putting in place enough mechanics that I could make a trailer. Because in the indie world, exposure is everything, traffic is everything, and you want to try and start marketing as soon as possible. So I was like, all right, I need to get my trailer out, I need to get my Steam page out, I'm just gonna get some basic gameplay in. I don't care if there's bugs, anything like that. Whip together a trailer in a month and put that out on Twitter, and it took off immediately.
So that was from like no dev to trailer amount of dev was 1 month?
Yes.
Wow, that's crazy. And so had you used Unreal before?
Yeah, so I'd been using Unreal for probably 6-7 years at that point. It was my first like big like first person game, so it was still a bit of a learning curve, but yeah.
So it goes viral like straight away?
Yeah, like day one.
Okay, so
Well, day two is when it hit its peak.
what was that like?
It was overwhelming, a bit. A good overwhelming though. Yeah, I was kind of just glued to Twitter and YouTube, just reloading. It was crazy. It was crazy to see it. It was the first time in as long as I've been making games that something went to plan and better. Everything had always gone worse than I hoped for. So this was a nice change of pace. Day one, dropped the trailer. It started picking up some steam. I think it got maybe 20-30,000 views or something on Twitter, which was great for me. That was way more than I'd ever done. I think on YouTube it got maybe 10 or 20,000. Did a little bit of some numbers on Reddit, and that translated to about 1,000 wish lists. And I was like, holy crap, 1,000 wish lists. That's awesome. That's a lot. That was like the most I'd ever gotten in one day on any of my games. And then day two came around and it pulled maybe like a million or close to a million on Twitter, and then a little bit more on Reddit, and that translated to 14,000 wish lists. And that was my new biggest day now. That was when I was like, okay, so this is something. Like for My Beautiful Paper Smile, it took me 3 years to get that many wish lists, and I just did this in a day. It did like 80,000 wish lists in the first couple weeks, and 100,000 in, I guess, probably in the first month or so.
What was it at when you launched?
When I launched, it was at 550,000.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I was pretty happy with that. It was a good count.
Okay, let's get off the hype train for a second and focus on design for a bit. For those of you who haven't played it, Choo Choo Charles is a game that takes place on an island where the community is being terrorized by a large spider train. You play as an outsider who has come in to help the islanders, and you do this by upgrading your own train with new weapons and collecting a set of eggs, which will trigger a climactic battle. The island also has a host of interesting side quests and piles of scrap that you can use to upgrade your train. It's a tight loop and the game can be completed in a handful of hours. So how did Gavin scope out this project? What problems did he run into? Where did he spend most of his development time? And where did he cut corners to meet his 1-year development deadline?
I pretty much had the general gameplay loop honed in before I placed a single node. Yeah, I mean, that was a big thing for me, is because I'm very focused on format, because like in making a game inherently viral, I feel like there's a lot of stuff that needs to be really baked into just the core of the game. And so a lot of the gameplay elements, like being able to drive a train around, the fact that it's open world, that stuff was important to have in place right from the start. So that was just like in the first few weeks that I was kind of concepting the game, that was when that stuff came in. The story, the mob and Warren and all like that kind of stuff, shrines and all that came in very late. The story went through, I think, 3 major shifts. I probably had 4 different scripts that I went through. So that stuff I was playing around with constantly until about 6 months for launch is when I finally sort of nailed that in. So the first thing that I kind of had to do was just get the island itself, getting the track system set up, kind of mapping out where generally I wanted like points of interest to be around the map, just getting the rail system. That was kind of the first big thing. It's just making it so you could actually get around the map. After that, I think it was kind of getting into like making the different missions. So I made like the 3 main missions, went in and did the different weapon missions, went in and did the side missions. And then kind of throughout that time, I was also working on, improving Charles' AI. That was something that was such a pain. I had to go through a lot of iterations just throughout development. Like if I had tried to make the game in a short period of time, it wouldn't have worked because Charles' AI would have been just horrible. So that was something that needed just years to mature. Just making sure he actually is able to navigate effectively. That was a pain. It was really easy for him to get stuck.
Right.
Especially with him being as large as he is. One of the first things I had to do was add various tests and checks in order to check if he's stuck, having different stages of like what he'll do if he does get stuck. So like first step, if he gets stuck, he'll run around in a circle until he gets unstuck. If that doesn't work and he's still not moving, then he has to like teleport to a new location. And if that still doesn't work, then he'll keep teleporting until he gets to a location where he like actually has navigation. And that was another thing, is like when you've got like these steep cliffs and stuff, it's difficult getting the AI to like run effectively up a cliff. It's common for him to like slide into areas since he's so big and heavy, he has to kind of like drift around a little bit. So that results in him sliding out of the navigation mesh into areas where he just gets stuck. So then he has to have more additional checks in case he slides out of bounds. Let's see, what are some other things? I mean, just the difficulty, just balancing it, that took a lot of time, just a lot of tuning, just having people try it out, say like, oh, okay, this is a little difficult in the beginning, a little hard later on. There's like a slight dynamic difficulty system, just kind of a basic one, like depending on how leveled up your train is, he'll be scared off more easily or less easily. His patrolling system, that was another big one. Because if you have a spider train in a massive island that's just walking around randomly, you'll never find him. He'll just be somewhere. He'll just be in a pit, he'll be in a cave, he'll just be walking around in circles somewhere, and you won't see him the entire game. And people probably wouldn't enjoy buying a game called Choo Choo Charles if they never saw Choo Choo Charles. So yes, I had to design a handful of different systems that I tried using for that. First one was where every like 10 or 20 minutes, he would randomly just attack you. But that was kind of a problem because it felt very unfair to be like sitting in a building and then all of a sudden you see over the top of a mountain 3 miles away, Charles charging straight towards you, pinpointing you. That didn't feel very good. People didn't like that. I didn't even like that. It was pissing me off while I was testing the game.
Right.
So I decided, you know what, maybe I should change that up a bit. Encounters with Charles were most fun when you could kind of see him nearby and you could effectively avoid him. I ended up going with a system where he always knows where the player is, but he spirals around them and he gets closer and farther depending on, various timers and stuff. So that way he'll be far away, like right after you fought him or after you've spawned in and started the game so that you're totally safe. And then a little later on, he'll get a little closer and you can kind of see him over the hills for a bit. So you get kind of a warning. And then he comes in a little bit closer to where you start hearing the music. And so then it's like, maybe you have some close encounters. And then, if you survive that, and you can avoid him for a few minutes, then it'll start kind of like going back out and it'll give you a few minutes to get back to your train or whatever. And so tuning that pattern as well, just the scaling of his patrolling zone, that was another thing that it took months of just playing and adjusting and playing and adjusting until it felt natural. It's weird. In order to make something feel natural, it has to be so unnatural behind the scenes. Aside from Charles' AI, the other most difficult thing would have been the mob AI, which was 10 times worse. But honestly, I regret having the mob in the game at all because those stealth sections, people did not like them.
The wrong place, my friend!
That's probably one of the biggest complaints I've had. So, and their AI was a pain, so that made it even worse. It's like I spent lots and lots and lots of time trying to make that AI and that stealth stuff work, and it just didn't. It still fell flat. The game, like from a technical standpoint, it's not that crazy. I'm not really doing anything that hasn't been done before. So it was mostly pretty simple. One of the biggest things probably would have just been like the open world environment design stuff. That was pretty tedious. There was a lot of stuff to do. That was probably a solid 4 months of development, just day in, day out. I did a lot of live streams of it as well, to try and make it a little bit less tedious, which did help. The scrap economy took a little bit of balancing, just figuring out like, okay, how much should this stuff cost? How much, how effective should the upgrades be? That stuff just took some balancing over time. Again, it was one of these things where it's just months of, as more people play it, you figure out which strategies are really overpowered and which ones are just horrible that everybody avoids. So it's just balancing over time. But the scrap system and upgrade system and the, getting the weapons from missions, that was always there.
Why don't you bring that box of rocket ammunition back here from inside the bunker down the rail?
So during those 15 months, you're obviously doing so much of this work. Do you have help in any way, or is there people helping with writing or animation or music or anything? Like, do you have any other collaborators on this project?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, I use, like some pre-made assets here and there. There's a lot of, like trees that I didn't make myself. So, help in that way. I hired a musician to do some original tracks. I had a friend who helped me out with kind of the lore side of things and the backstory. My family helped me out a lot with like kind of editing the script. My brother, he contributed a lot of top tier jokes to the game.
Who's responsible for Pickle Lady?
Pickle Lady was me. That was me. I take responsibility.
I need my pickles!
I did not have a lot of people playtesting until probably the last 3 months of development. So I had just like friends and family testing it early on, which was part of where some of the stress stuff was coming from, because like I had no idea how good or bad the game was, because not enough people had played it. Initially, like it didn't even cross my mind that people would care about facial animations or that people would dislike my Fuse characters. I was like, well, what's wrong with my Fuse characters? They look great. So I just wasn't expecting people to even notice at all in the first place. And then people did notice. By the time I actually knew that people would have liked it to be higher quality, it was too late in development to make changes like that anyways. But as far as like the broader scope of those sort of decisions, I guess kind of my main decision-making process is like, is somebody going to write a negative review if I don't add this feature? Or are they going to write a positive review if I do add this feature? And anything else, it's like I still want to have like a little bit of extra. I want to meet expectations and go a little bit above, but a lot of developers, they think that a feature is really important that actually isn't. So it's also just like, for me personally, I like simple games. I like a game that I can sit down and start playing and I don't need to spend 5 hours getting into it for it to, get good. Most of it can be boiled down to fetch quest, get this item from this place. But I tried to make it so like there was, oh, this one has a goofy character, or this one takes place in a slightly different environment, or, this one you have to do parkour, I'm a very strong proponent of tools down like a month before launch. And so leading up to launch, I basically had a month where it was just emailing, content creators, reaching out to, just sending keys to people, working on YouTube videos, devlogs, TikToks, just the whole marketing campaign stuff. Ultimately, I mean, it went pretty well leading up. I was able to get done most of the stuff that I wanted to get done. I did a live stream where I actually launched the game on stream. And for the past couple weeks, I'd been promoting like the specific hour and the times that like everybody knew when it was, exactly when it was dropping. So I, on the live stream, pressed the launch button.
Release my app. We press release now.
There were probably 4 or 5 points throughout development where the pressure got really high. It was one of these things where I knew no matter when I released the game, people were going to play it. And the big thing that I had to worry about is, were they going to like it? there were various points throughout development when I would be playing the game, or I'd have a friend playing the game, and I'd realize, oh, like this really sucks. This is actually not a good game at this point. Pressure went up and down, and then I would like fix a bunch of stuff, and I'd be feeling good about it, and I'd have somebody else play, and then it's like, oh, it still sucks. By the time it got to launch, I was pretty confident in it. I'd spent plenty of time, probably 3 months just in polishing, I just had hundreds of people play testing it and giving tons of feedback. So I was pretty happy with, the feedback that I was getting by launch. So the pressure on launch day, I mean, it was high, but it was pretty manageable.
You had some confidence in it.
Yeah, I had some confidence.
We just intently watch the spinny box. Let's start reloading the Steam page. Hey, I think it's out. Guys, go check it and let me know in chat. Is it out?
Closed down the stream, went and started checking numbers. I went to YouTube I sent out codes to like content creators like 2 weeks beforehand. So a flood of videos like immediately as the game came out. Started watching those. Started checking the player count on SteamDB, because you don't get the sales figures until a little bit later, and it started, like, the player count just started going up, and I was like, oh, that's already higher than I was expecting it to be, just in the first few minutes there. And then I was kind of just able to sit back and watch it. There weren't really any major bugs. Like, that was kind of my big fear going into it. I think that's like every developer's worst nightmare, is that there's going to be a game-breaking bug on launch. Thankfully, I had gotten all of that stuff under control during kind of the testing phase, and there were no issues. I was able to take the whole weekend and just watch everything unfold, which was very, very nice. Yeah, I mean, like, I was watching playthroughs and stuff, trying to make sure that people weren't getting stuck anywhere. I was checking, reviews in the community hub on Steam, trying to make sure that there wasn't anything going bad. And there were a couple small things that I ironed out over the following week. Yeah, for the most part, it ended up being fine. All throughout the development process, since it was gaining steam, no pun intended, all the way through, for the whole year. So I had plenty of content creators that reached out to me. I had a list of email addresses and all the people who were interested and who had talked about the game, or who had tweeted about the game and all this stuff. So I had a list of people who I already knew were interested. And actually, I think I only emailed people who were already interested in the game. It ended up going pretty well. I think pretty much everybody that I was hoping would play it did. All my favorite channels that that I've been watching forever. Probably the one that I was most excited to see was John Wolf. I've been a fan of his channel for quite a while. I'd probably credit him with a lot of my game design knowledge, honestly. His critiques on stuff, because it's a very honest, level-headed approach to critiquing stuff. And so watching all of his horror game playthroughs over time, that's been a big help. So seeing him play through it was really cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. I'm really enjoying it. Oh. I saw some scrap.
Some of them, have played my previous game, so I've kind of experienced it already. No Snake Hotel is a little game that I did on my YouTube channel for sort of a challenge. That got played by a bunch of people. Same with my Beautiful Paper Smile. That one got played a bit as well. So it wasn't a foreign feeling, but it was really, really cool to see them enjoying another one. Yeah, the reaction from fans was phenomenal. The people who I wanted to enjoy it enjoyed it thoroughly, and that has me very, very happy. I mean, that's where like any stress that I had leading up to launch, that's where it was, that's where it stemmed from. Seeing my subscribers and the people who had been following me throughout the development journey, seeing them really happy with it, that was awesome. Reception from press, I can't say I was expecting good scores. I wasn't really expecting press to like it. It's one of those things where it's for a game as lighthearted and just that doesn't really take itself seriously. It's a half meme game, half serious game. I just knew that press wouldn't be into that, so I wasn't too worried about it.
Were you personally offended by the 4 out of 10 from IGN, or was it
No, not really. I avoided watching it for quite a while. Eventually I didn't. I was like, oh, that's whatever. I mean, he's got some valid points. I mean, 4 out of 10 is a little lower than I was expecting, but.
It seemed like a game that they often wouldn't usually review. Actually.
Right, that's the weirdest thing to me, is that as many press folks reviewed it as they did. Like, you got tons of press reviews. Like, it's Spider Troy. Why are you even looking at this? That was the part that confused me the most.
I was very excited, very relieved for him, because I wanted it to be well received, and I wanted it to, the IGN rating, that bummed me out, but it didn't seem to bother him too terribly much.
Right, and obviously the sort of wider reception was overwhelmingly positive.
Yeah, it was great to see the high reviews on Steam and watch playthroughs and seeing people really like it. So it was good to see that it appeared that it was going to be commercially successful, and that it would give him some breathing room to be able to survive and be able to work on another project and keep doing this thing that he wants to do. I've been watching him work for a long time, and he was working on Choo Choo Charles while he was still living at home with us, and he was kind of a workaholic about it, but I watched him learn all the different facets of the gaming industry, and so I knew if anybody could do it, he could do it. And I knew he was being very systematic about the game development and the marketing, and fully understanding the big picture of how to be successful.
Basically, as soon as I started making games, I knew that was what I wanted to do. I was like, no matter how long it takes, eventually I'll have a successful game, and whatever time I spent in college, whatever money I spent in college, it'll become worthless. So even if it's 10, 15 years down the line, eventually this is going to happen, or I will die. One of the two things.
How has the success sort of affected your day-to-day now and what you're looking at in the future?
Kind of the main thing is, it gives me breathing room. It gives me time to, get the porting figured out. I'm able to outsource that. Yeah, ultimately, it gives me time to figure out the next project and do the next project right and do it better. It's like the game is done well enough and the YouTube channel is done well enough that I don't need to make crazy big games or anything. As I've continued researching game development and just doing game development, I keep on finding oh wait, I could do something cooler. I could improve on this mechanic or that mechanic or all these different things. I want to see how far I can push it. I feel like there's a lot more that I can do, and a lot more games that I could make. So it's I still feel like I need to be, working as hard as I, did on Choo Choo Charles for the next games. So, there's probably going to be a little bit more audience carryover since I do have the YouTube channel and stuff, but it doesn't, I feel like it doesn't give too much security. Every game kind of has to stand on its own 2 feet.